Hello, hi everyone. Hello, hi everyone. I guess we can start on time. So I think everyone is more or less settled. So good afternoon and welcome to the last session of the day. I hope that this session will be as interesting and as useful to all of you here. And just so I can tweak the presentation for it to be the most relevant to the people here, can I just get a quick show of hands if anyone here is an entrepreneur? Awesome. If anyone here is working in a startup? Awesome. Anyone here working in corporate America? Awesome. Anyone here planning to start their own company at some point in the future? Okay, good. I think this talk is going to be really helpful for that. People that from corporate America or that want to move to a startup, want to work for a startup. Okay, great. So I want to make this session also really interactive. So after this presentation, I'll share a little bit my background in detail, and then we can have a little Q&A, and you can ask me anything. I have a pretty diverse background, so hopefully I can cover a lot of questions. So we can start. So when I was coming up with a title for this presentation, some of the ideas I had was how to prepare for life as a startup founder, or setting yourself up for a very entrepreneurial career. But I finally decided on a title Entrepreneurial Champions, because I think the word champion really captures the attitude that I think will really set up everyone for success. And the reason why I really like the word champion is because it has two meanings. The first meaning is, a champion is a winner, right? A champion is someone that, oh, perfect. A champion is someone that, got the prize, that achieved a goal, that beat the rival, that beat failure. And I think whatever we do, we should always have a goal, even if that goal changes. Because if you don't have a goal, you'll end up anywhere, and it's not a very purposeful way to live your life. The second reason why I really like the word champion, and is also the second meaning of champion, is that champion, it's both a noun and also a verb. A champion is a supporter. A champion is an advocate. And when you champion something, when you advocate something, it usually implies a champion off, right? Off, meaning something other than yourself. And I think that's really important, because that championing off, that something other than yourself, is the why of why you're doing something. It's outward looking. And I think it's that why that will inspire you, and most of all will inspire others, whether it's an investor investing in your company, or your boss investing their time to really nurture your career. And so as someone who was a founder and currently an investor, I always look especially early stage, you don't have a lot of data. You really look for that spark in that founder. They call it the hunger. Why are you doing this? And also when you're hiring someone, when I was hiring for a company, I always look for ask myself why is this person interested in joining my company? What is it in their background? Is it the industry that we're in? Is it the role that I have? And I think if you're also an advocate, if you're a champion of your startup, and it shows, especially in a startup, obviously, if someone's a big champion of your company, you just become more invested in their career, right? And so I really want, which is why I really like the word champion. We should all be champions of ourselves, but also with whatever it is that we're doing. And since we're all we all love, we all love innovation, we all love entrepreneurship, like that's why we're all here. And to the people that are not thinking of starting a company yet, but want to be around that energy, this talk will like outline some career options for you. Also some tips on how to be like a good champion, how to set yourself up for success, and also some resources if you want to switch careers, especially in industries like venture capital and also like incubators and accelerators, because it's a very opaque industry. And this applies to founders too. If you want to talk to like VCs, it's important to have those relationships already, because they're not gonna, they want to invest in people that they know. So before you're ready to start fundraising, you should like start having this conversation. So if you want to be, around startups, and if you want to know what it's like to be a founder, I think there's like almost nothing better than actually joining a startup. But there's a difference between an early stage startup and a late stage startup. And if you ask me, it doesn't really matter what role you get into at first. So I wouldn't obsess about roles, especially with early stage. One, because if you really believe in the company, like you can't say, oh, I really want to do like corporate development. They're not going to hire for like a corporate development role until they're like Series D. And so for founders, especially when I was also recruiting to join a startup, they like it when you ask them like, what do you need help with, right? Like I will do anything. Like that's the kind of attitude that like startups love. And also it tells them like, oh, this person, is willing to learn. And so if you're joining a startup, I would not obsess about roles. Also, if you see a listing, I wouldn't just, click submit. I would actually try to get a warm intro. And this applies not just to startups, but also to big corporations. And I think, especially for early stage startups, a lot of the roles do not get posted because they don't have HR yet. So if you're interested, especially if you like early stage, because you want a more senior and a more impactful role, like I would go network, because a lot of like early stage founders are always like networking. And usually I would advise to go to like pitch competitions, because normally they're like looking for funding. And so often you're finding, founders that are looking to raise a round and will be hiring people soon. And then I think with whatever role you have, I would always like optimize for like learning and impact. And if you're looking to join a company, some of the websites I recommend for like startup roles is AngelList. And AngelList is also great because a lot of the roles there, they actually indicate salary and equity, which is very useful. And also if you're coming from a corporate role and you don't want to take a huge pay cut, late stage startups actually pay like very well. It's a misnomer that if you work for a startup you're going to take a pay cut. That's not the case. Another site that's actually not very common that I think actually have better roles than AngelList and actually have better paying roles is VentureLoop. VentureLoop is great because it has like amazing filters. Another site which you probably already heard of is The Muse. And other resources that is not as common are actually Facebook groups. There are Facebook groups that are very targeted for like people looking for jobs in startups. So some of the Facebook groups that I know of, there's Dreamers and Doers, like Jobs and Gigs. There's also Tech Ladies. And if you're targeting like a specific industry and you're figuring out like, oh, which networking event should I go to? There's meetup.com if you haven't heard of it. It's a great way to find networking opportunities. You can also just search through like Eventbrite, and there's always like events listed there. And if you know a VC and if you know an accelerator, I would actually talk to like a VC, because like one of the value they add their company is to help them hire good people. So VCs actually really want to talk to talented people. And it's different if it's like a VC introducing you to their portfolio company, right? Like the portfolio company will talk to you at least. So I think that's a great way to get it in startups. If you want to be an entrepreneurial champion and you're more interested in being on like the venture capital side, it's a harder industry to break into just because there's not a lot of roles. But that said, if you're interested in an investing role and you want to invest in startups, like a traditional venture capital firm is not your only option. Like right now, so many big corporations are actually setting up their corporate venture capital. So if you work for like Pepsi, if you work for like Samsung, even like very traditional like construction companies are now setting up their corporate venture capital firms. So especially if you've built expertise in a certain industry, so I would look at corporations within your industry, and I would actually just cold outreach and ask them like, hey, are you thinking about innovation or corporate venture capital? Because sometimes they don't announce it until like they already hired someone. So you want to be there, because I'm pretty sure almost all of them are thinking about innovation, whether they're setting up their own VC firm or they're investing in VC firms. Another like path which you probably don't really hear about are family offices. So what are family offices? Family offices are basically really wealthy people, like Jeff Bezos has a family office. Sir Richard Branson has a family office. And if you're a really wealthy person, you want to diversify your assets. And so some of them would hire like a bank to like manage their investment, but because they want to diversify it and a bank doesn't offer like the full suite of financial products that they can invest in, they hire people in-house. So their money, they invest it in stocks, they invest it in bonds, they invest in real estate, they invest in hedge funds. That's how a lot of hedge funds get their funding. They invest in private equity. They're the ones that actually fund venture capital firms. Now what I see a lot is that like family offices are actually starting to invest directly in companies. And some family offices actually incubate companies. There's Palm Ventures, and the guy made his money like in the restaurant business, but he's incubating companies in like kind of related industries. And so that is like one way to get a role, investing in startups. How you get into family office, that's trickier. It's a lot of networking, and obviously it's hard to like network because you don't see these people attending like meetups, right? And so if you're really scrappy, you can like Google like family office events, and maybe you can volunteer at these events and you can like talk to them. I would say though, if you're lucky enough to get access to these people, and if you think they're hiring, networking is just like one thing. You really have to like sell yourself, because like everyone wants, a lot of people want to be investors. And so before you even, start putting yourself out there, you need to be very prepared. And like, how do you prepare? Like one is get really smart about an industry or technology. If you have someone that like has been working for a while, like I would look for firms that invest, for example, if you're in healthcare, that like invest in healthcare. Or sometimes it's actually easier to be smart on like a new technology, but really understand that technology, be an expert. And so when you talk to them, you have a view of where the industry is going. And you have your own thesis of, the companies you want to invest in. And you need to like learn the language. There's like a few books in venture capital, and you really need to know the terms. You need to do math in your head in terms of like, oh, if I put X% here, I can expect, 10x return. Like usually that's the multiple that people like look for. And I think you also have to prepare your pitch. Like, and when I say pitch, like you need to, prepare to like pitch deals. What that means is that it's not enough that you know a lot about an industry. If you're talking to like a family office or like, a fund, and you say, oh, I think, VR is going to be the future, and these are the trends in VR that I believe in. You need to be prepared for them to say, okay, what are the companies that you find interesting? And so you need to prepare two things. One, oh, I like these companies, like companies that are already well known, even if they're not going to be able to invest in those companies anymore, but you should be able to prepare, oh, I like these companies, and these are why I think these companies will be successful. And I think you should also network and say, oh, by the way, I know 3 startups that I think are investable and I think are worth looking, doing a due diligence on, and they're probably raising money soon. Because when you do that, they can say, okay, she's ready. We can actually put her to work. We can hire her. If you're not prepared, then you're wasting your time in front of these people. And yeah, so that's it for I guess if you want to be an investor, and obviously that's more on the early stage side. If you want to invest more later stage, it's a very different skill set that they look for. They usually want people with very analytical background, people that have done investment banking and honestly, I probably won't get hired for those roles. But if you do have that background, or if you can demonstrate that, hey, I can do these models. If you can be scrappy with how you get that experience, then that's how you get in. And actually, if you're interested in later stage deals, but you don't have a typical finance background, you can probably try to get in through private equity if you have relationships with companies. And so again, you come in pitching specific deals that you've done your analysis on, because these firms, they're always looking for deals. If you say, oh, there's 3 companies that I think are great, and you do a quick summary, they'll talk to you. And then from there, it's up to if they're hiring, if they think the deal is good, they'll probably pay you a fee, even if they don't formally hire you. And then if you want, to be around entrepreneurs and provide support through capital, but also something more hands-on and more strategic, I think accelerators and incubators are a good career option. I think other options kind of in this realm, maybe without capital, would be startup boot camps. So I think Founder Institute is one. And also there are now tech communities, and some of them are becoming businesses. And so you could get a role there. And there's a variety of roles that you could go for. In terms of actually getting these opportunities, I think, and I think you're going to see this across all, is really network. And I think network here is really, especially for accelerators and incubators, is actually attending and volunteering for their demo days. Because they're if they have a demo, they're always looking for people to help with the event, and it's a way for you to get to know the people running the accelerators and incubators. And what you guys probably don't know is that the turnover is actually quite high. A lot of program manager are only program manager for maybe 2-3 years max, and then they move on to do something else. And so if you think you have the time, really get to know those people, be very helpful, and be upfront, hey, I want to do this. And it's a very small community. They'll keep an eye out for you if there's an opportunity. And obviously, if you come across an opportunity, you always tell your friends, right? Or people first. And a lot of these roles don't get posted unless it's a big accelerator. And by that point, they probably already have a pool of candidates that they're excited about. I guess for VC and accelerator roles, some resources would be AngelList. These roles do get posted there, but there are also tech blogs. For VC, there's one specific blog called, there's johngannonblog.com, and he has a pretty good list of VC roles. And there are also headhunters that actually place women in investing role. One is called Parity Partners. Another thing to also utilize is actually your alumni network, because a lot of schools are now starting their own angel funds, and some of the people in your alumni network are probably angel investors and are more connected, especially if they're putting in capital in startups. And so I would do that, because someone from your school is more likely to pick up the call and talk to you. Another path, another option if you want to be around innovation entrepreneurs is, aside from corporate venture capital, a lot of corporations now actually have programs specific to innovation and to working with entrepreneurs. So UBS has one. I think they're partnering with like Project Runway. And a lot of like the innovation teams in the big corporations, because a lot of them won't set up a corporate venture capital, but a lot of their innovation teams are more and more working with startups. And a lot of them like partner with accelerators, like SAP has their own corporate venture arm. They also set up like an early stage fund, but they've also partnered with Techstars. So if you're working for a corporation, you should ask internally. And normally the people that think about setting up innovation is usually the strategy team or the corporate development team. So I would like ask them and say, hey guys, are you thinking about innovation? How are you thinking about engaging with startups? And if they're not, I would like ask your competitor, because they might be thinking about it, and your background will be really, really relevant. And I think, when you pitch to them, again, I think similar to everything is like, the more plugged in you are to the ecosystem, and the more you can talk about like trends and like startups that you like, the more you can convince people. Because if you talk high level, people are going to agree with you, but they're not going to be excited. But when you talk specific, they're like, yeah, we should do that. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, we should actually do something. And also, if a company is not thinking about it yet, aside from strategy roles, like a lot of them are starting to set up digital teams. So that's also like a good in a corporation. And those teams tend to be more entrepreneurial than the traditional like product teams. So that is an option, especially if you're already like in a big corporation, or if you're in a startup and want to move to something like bigger. And again, like network. I think for startup roles actually, and for big corporation, getting a warm intro is always better. Like a lot of big corporations actually, they have bots where if you're not referred, like your resume won't even get a look, especially if there's like a high volume of applicants. And so I would always try to get a warm intro. For startups also, people say like, oh, don't bother with like a cover letter. But if you're getting a warm intro, if you're getting a referral, I would write that cover letter. Because when I was hiring before, like if you don't have a cover letter, I would just assume that, oh, you're just applying to like 20 companies and you're not that interested in my company. So I would look at people that have like cover letter and have explained like why they're interested in my company and why they're interested in this role. So get a warm intro and write that cover letter. And then an option that a lot of people don't think about are nonprofits. There are actually nonprofits that focus on startups. And one, believe it or not, especially in New York, is like the government. There's actually a lot of interesting roles in government that they're doing amazing things. So one is NYC EDC. So New York is doing a lot of interesting like public-private partnerships. So an example would be like the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So it's a very real estate focused group, but they work with entrepreneurs, they work with like developers to encourage entrepreneurship in the city. There's also, New York also has like a tech department, and they actually hire consultants, they hire engineers, they hire product people. So I wouldn't like discount like government because there are interesting roles there, and there are young people that you'll be working with. Obviously, there are entrepreneurial focused like nonprofits, and there are also impact funds. It's interesting though how you get into like those impact funds, and the roles are. It also depends on the roles. Like for impact funds, if you're looking at an investing role, like they usually want people with like a more like with an investing background. But in impact funds, they're also looking for portfolio people that can help their portfolio companies. And so you can you can have a more diverse background, right, getting into these roles. And if you're coming from like a different nonprofit and you want to join like an impact fund, a skill that's like really valued is like a fundraiser. Like people are always trying to like raise money for their fund, and so so maybe a more, I guess, like circuitous path is to join another nonprofit, tell them, hey, I'm gonna like fundraise for you, have like a good track record there, and maybe move on to like an impact fund. You know, these are just some ideas. I'm not saying like this is what you should do. And yeah, there's obviously like, you know, special cases. Yeah, and I guess for resources, I guess a really good site for nonprofit roles that are really interesting, and some of the nonprofits now are actually very similar to startups. They're started by very young people, they're very metrics driven, all of the stuff they do actually incorporate technology. So I would also look at just like traditional nonprofit that may not be working with entrepreneurs, but like are using like very innovative approach to solving their problem. And a lot of them are on onramps.com. There's like a lot of really cool jobs there. Another site is jobs.thegin.org. They have a lot of like interesting roles, especially with like impact funds and, you know, portfolio companies with those impact funds. And yeah, I would check government sites, like career section. Like you'd be surprised, there are some like interesting roles there. And yeah, and that's it, I guess, in terms of like options. If you want to work with entrepreneurs, if you want a more kind of a role that is more like innovative or entrepreneurial, I guess this is a section where you can like ask me questions. And before we do that, I can share a little bit more about like what I've done. So I started my career in the Philippines back in 2004, you know, when startups were not cool at all. I worked for a payments company, like a fintech company. We launched in India, Japan, and the US. And so I was employee number 2 of that company. By the time the company exited, I mean, it didn't grow that big, but you know, we had like 100 employees. And then I moved over to a big corporation. So I worked for Nestle. I handled the bottled water portfolio. So I was brand manager for Nestle Pure Life, Perrier, San Pellegrino, Vitel, and then, you know, decided like I want to move back to tech. So I joined a telco again. Before moving here to the U.S. For business school, I went to Wharton and tried finance. I feel like I have like all these like student debt, like I better work in finance and like, you know, bring some of the loans down. I did commodities for like a year and a half, and then I started my own startup in the consumer tech space. And then last year I transitioned out of the startup. It's still live and it's launching in Southeast Asia, but I've moved on because, you know, I'm based in the US, and right now I'm working for a venture capital firm in Asia, and we do both early stage and late stage investing. Our late stage tends to be not like tech companies, it's more like real estate and traditional PE type deals. For early stage, we're more Series A and Asia focused. It's the SoftBank fund, like specific to the Philippines. And I've personally invested in a few startups and have advised a few startups. And so I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me, but so I'm actually coming from a traditional investing role, and I'm looking to transition into more of the VC space in the investing role. And I'm kind of curious to hear your opinion. You mentioned that, you know, obviously I'm more late stage. I'm actually in alternative assets, so very, you know, analytical, a lot of modeling. How is the VC role different? And kind of what do you recommend in terms of making that transition and how to kind of translate the skills I have into them?
Yeah, so like one, it's still, across all these like options, like definitely like network, because you know, when a role opens up, people tend to ask like their friends, and then their friends refer like people they know. There are specific headhunters that focus on kind of late stage VC. I don't know if you've tried GlowCap.
I've heard of them, but never had.
Yeah, so they actually, a lot of the roles that come up there are actually more late stage than early stage. So there are like headhunters that like, yeah, that like specializes in those roles. So GlowCap, there's parity partners. And I would actually approach kind of, I guess, like bigger funds, because a lot of them are starting to look at tech. Even like PE firms are starting to look at tech. Even healthcare funds are now looking at like healthcare, digital health. So I would talk to them and say like, hey, I think this is interesting. Are you guys, thinking of hiring for this role? And I think what could also work if you have the flexibility is say like, hey, maybe I can like help out with like some small projects, even if they don't have a job, right? Like offer your service for free. Like, oh, I'm happy to do like your model for you. I'm happy to do like this due diligence for you. And if they like your work, like, I guess what people don't realize that I'm starting to like realize now is that like when someone meets like a really talented person, even if there's no role for them, like they're gonna find a way to like hire you, because it's really hard to find like really good people. And so you just need to like demonstrate that. Okay.